Welcome to Innovation Chats with Dr. Abigail Joseph, the Innovation Doctor. Welcome to this month's Innovation Chat. We are going to enter the crafting zone with our special guest, Ms. Katie O'Bryon Champlin.
Yeah.
Yay! So excited to have you here, Katie, and
Thank you.
have a conversation with you. I always start off with my guests. If I know them, I like them to share a little bit about how they know me.
Yes. So we met, I think, at the lunch table, like officially. We both work at the same school, and I think it was like at the lunch table where, we just got to chatting, and sometimes when you sit at the lunch table, you meet people and you start to go, oh, like we're kind of on the same page about some stuff, or you just kind of find those I don't know, kindred spirits, for lack of a better word. But we had kind of, like, I think once we got to talking, we realized we had often been in sort of the same places, just not at the same times.
Yeah.
Like, we have a Santa Cruz connection, and then like you were at Castellea and I was there very briefly covering for someone. So, it was kind of like almost like we were sort of following around, and it was just only a matter of time.
Yes, a matter of time before we connected. And also I did a lot of I did a leadership program where I spent a lot of time in Napa. And so we have the
that one too. That's right. Yeah. So
the world is small, and the Bay Area in general is small as well.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about getting people into the crafting zone. And I love, I think one of the things we have in connection is just making things. And I always admire when I see you post the little things that you create. I always admire them. And then I've also been able to follow you make some stuff when during our trip week, when kids are on campus and you do crafty things with them. I made this lovely little unicorn stuffy, which I call Query, and I ask them all my questions. I haven't decided if Query has a gender, so it's made them. And then one day I saw you create the cutest little felted items, and you were so kind and sweet, and you gifted me a felting kit to get started, and I made this lovely dinosaur, which excites me to no end. So that is exciting as well. So my first question is, have you always been a crafter?
Yeah, it's funny. Like when you sent me these questions, it was really interesting because I don't think about crafting as much. I'm a performing arts teacher, and I'm an actor and a director, a choreographer. So I think a lot of times about like performing arts craft and like, who and where and why and how it started. But I don't think about these other things as much, which this is kind of given me an opportunity to stop and think about these things. So I think my mom would tell you, yes, I have always been, a crafter of some kind. My mom has said before, like I always had a project going. But I don't remember specifically like, a thing from childhood where like, oh yeah, I always made clay horses or, something like that. But I did have like a regular stream of like learning some little basic skills. Like I was a Girl Scout, and I remember like we had to make an apron one time for a badge. And I remember like learning like cross stitch and back stitch in that. And then when I was my middle school, it was not a well-funded middle school. We didn't have a lot of extracurricular. We didn't even have a gym or a theater or anything. We didn't even have like a place to run. Like we had to run on this field with gopher holes. But there was a point where they decided to add this class called exploratory. And in the exploratory class, teachers could teach like anything. And it was like a wheel rotation. So we'd have each one for maybe like a month. So with the exploratory classes, we got some weird things that the teachers just happened to do. So we had like we had a counted cross stitch class, which I remember making a goldfish in that turned out really well. We had a folk painting class, which is like it's a specific style of painting. A lot of times it's roosters, but you do these Yeah, like you can probably picture it, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
like this
yeah.
Swedish looking,
Mhm.
and there's certain strokes that you do, and I remember doing that. We had like a puppet making class where we did hand puppets. So like over the years, I
Mm.
had many opportunities to learn how to thread a needle and do some basic, stitching and things like that. Um, and I think too, like a lot of kids, there was probably a period of time where I said I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. I liked to draw. I spent a lot of time drawing and sketching and things like that. So yeah, I think I've always have kind of had some sort of artistic I don't know, tendencies. But like I didn't
Yeah.
take art classes more formally than just what was, given in school. I didn't do much in terms of training outside of what just happened to show up in my childhood.
Yeah, yeah. You just reminded me of a cool childhood memory of yeah, and I don't know if it was elementary or middle school, but I do remember making these paper mache puppets.
Ah.
And we made the heads out of paper mache, and then we had to create a body out of cloth or whatever. When you said puppeteering, I was like, oh yeah, I did some really fun crafty things in elementary school, which was really fun. Um,
Yeah.
so um, let's talk about things you like to do. So, I mentioned this lovely thing, a felting project that I did, inspired by you. So what are some of your favorite things to create?
Yeah. So I really enjoy sewing. And there was a period of time, kind of right around, I think maybe just before I got married, where just got really into like learning some more like legitimate sewing techniques. Like I actually made a dress that was like decent enough to wear, maybe in places where the lighting is not great. You know, and I've made a couple of quilts and some things like that. So I really enjoy sewing. However, I've found that like since I've started more of a like regular day full-time job, and I've had a family, sewing is a little bit harder. It requires precision, like it's not as forgiving as some other crafts.
Mm,
So if you cut it a little bit off and it doesn't quite line up, then you spend hours trying to figure out how to fix it. And I'm not great at troubleshooting yet with sewing. So I've started doing more kind of smaller like felting crafts and little stitching of little creatures. I get a lot of, kits to start out. The unicorn you made, I actually have to kind of give credit to. There was a teacher that I think she was only at Harker for a year, but she was the one who had the idea. She was a very good seamstress, sewer, stitcher. She made a lot of her own clothes. And so she wanted to do like a little, like making little felt creatures class with the kids on trips week. It's kind of a summer camp environment and you do things that are outside of the normal school day. And I assisted her during that. And I learned some tricks myself just by watching her. And then I kept it going once she was no longer at the school because I enjoyed it so much. It was great
yeah,
to watch the kids have to thread a needle and do something that requires just a little bit of, patience and kind of, just, I don't know, hand-eye coordination. It's
yeah,
not a video game. So she was the one who kind of got me started making like these little I grabbed some right here, these little felt
yeah.
kind of, oh wait, there we go.
Oh, there you go.
Felt
Oh,
critters.
Chewie and Yoda.
Yeah, no, these I will say these are from a kit. If you go to like bookstores, a lot of times they'll have these like, little like crafting kits where there's like a book and then some basic materials. Like they'll give you the felt and just enough thread to make some, things that are in the book. So I enjoy doing those a lot because I can follow the steps.
Mhm.
And I think as an actor, I find it really satisfying to do something that is like not like me, it's more in front of me, and then I know
Mm,
when it's complete.
mm,
This just kind of occurred to me because like I think when you're studying acting and you spend like I mean when you do that all day long, you just like you never know when it's done. I mean, the
yeah.
show opens, right? There's an old phrase in the theater like you never finish rehearsing, you just open the show. Because you could go on forever.
Yeah.
But, when you have a little book that says like cut out Han Solo's head and stitch a mouth on, you can go, okay, I just did that. And so it's very clear when a step is complete, which is a nice change of pace, I find.
Yeah, I can totally see that. It's also, the same thing with art, right? You could take out paints and put it on a canvas, and that process can go on forever. And you never know when you're like completely done, or if you're ever done, really, you might revisit it. But I like this notion of, when you're in the crafting zone, and especially if you're using like a crafting kit, there's a beginning and there's an end, and what happens in the middle sometimes is a little fun and interesting to see what happens in the middle. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The other thing, if you're just joining us, in chat, if you could put in anything crafty that you enjoy doing. We'd love to hear about what crafty things you love doing if you're joining us. And there was something you were saying about sewing and it not being forgiving. I could think of one instance where sewing is a little forgiving. I remember back in 8th grade when they used to have home ec. We had home ec.
Oh yeah, I never did. That's awesome.
We had sewing and we had cooking. We made like applesauce, and that's the one thing. I think I remember the applesauce because you had to use a special like mill after you softened all the apples to like make it into sauce. And then we had sewing, and I remember I made a lot of stuffies of varying types, but then I also remember like getting into sewing shorts. And they were not flattering shorts by any means. They were like basically a box,
like a square, yeah,
like a square with some legs, and
yep.
And then like a fold over on the top where you could then put a cord.
Oh yeah.
Like
a drawstring kind of.
Yeah, drawstring type of thing, and that's what they were. But I was thinking, oh well, yeah, if you're doing things that are just straight lines, that's almost kind of forgiving enough. Done a few throw pillows in my day.
Yeah, a friend of mine, because it comes up a lot, for theater, like you need kind of last minute costumes or some simple things for especially some of like the short-term theater productions like camps and things like that. And I used to make a lot of these. My friend and I call them head donuts. It was basically you just sew a long tube and like almost like a snake, and then you stuff it, and then you connect the ends, and then you can wrap, like you get like a string of fake beads or like ribbon, and you can wrap it around, and it makes a really nice like medieval headdress. And they look good, and they're very easy to make like quickly. I've even done them just with hot glue in a pinch for like camps and things where you realize like, oh, we don't have enough of these and we got 5 kids and we only have 4 hats. Here you go. That's one where like you get a lot of it, you look like you sewed something, but actually it's very simple.
Yeah.
It's very forgiving.
Completely. So I was thinking about like the creations that you make, and thinking about this one that I made that on the package the dinosaur looked very different. And let me tell you, the process, I really enjoyed it. I also know that along the way I was all like, I'm not quite sure how to make what I did kind of look like the step in the kit. And well, I'll just carry on. So I guess my question is kind of like, how do you often follow the steps step by step? Or along the way, have you gotten into areas where you're like, that doesn't seem quite right. How do I move on from that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with these kind of little flat, like stuffed, felt creatures, I usually follow the steps pretty accurately in the order because sometimes you realize like, oh, it's going to be easier to like embroider the face before I stitch the two parts together. Um, occasionally you do find like little mistakes in the books where you go like, oh, I don't think that's accurate. To make that length or it just doesn't fit the way it describes. So sometimes you do find little things where you have to kind of like guess based on what you think it's trying to do. For the needle felting, where you stab little balls of wool like that dinosaur, those I do find once I know the basics, I can play around a little bit more with the order in which I do things. Sometimes it just depends on what I feel like doing in the moment, because I do find that it has a little bit more of a almost like sculpting quality to it, where you can kind of make things fit together and continue to shape them, go back and touch something up. It's very hard to very hard to take away like the fibers if you've used too much, but you can always add more on top. I actually grabbed like just from like before, like I have a whole bucket of the little gnomes right here. And one of the things that I think is kind of interesting, and I'll talk about how I learned how to make these in a minute too, because it was kind of an interesting thing. So like, can you see them?
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like they all, I followed the same pattern, but they all are different in terms of just how the faces look. Like they just get their own personalities, even if you exactly follow the
Totally want to make a gnome now for Christmas.
I can teach you how to make one. I can get you some. I can set you up.
Right.
But I'll tell you how. So this is sort of an interesting thing. I grabbed this. I found this book. It's called The Gnome Project, and who is it by? It's by Jessica Peill-Meininghaus. Anyway, it was just sort of a random thing. My gnomes are kind of a thing in our house. My husband and I, when we got married, we had like, I don't want to say a gnome themed wedding because that sounds really weird, but like there were garden gnomes as part of the decor, like with the flowers and stuff. Like it was a whole thing. So when you do that for years afterwards, people buy you gnomes or get you gnome things, or they just catch your eye. So I don't remember if I was given this book or if I saw it in a bookstore, but what I liked about it is the back is all just instructions on how to make these gnomes, using pipe cleaners, and they're pretty simple to put together. So it has, it gives you the list of, oh, you can't see, this is terrible. I should have had my non-blur. The list of supplies. It has pictures on, how to do each step. But the whole front of the book, this woman gave herself the challenge to make a gnome a day for a year. Kind of one of these like mindfulness or like just goal setting, like doing something simple really well and consistently type tasks, which I think is cool. I think I've identified that I will just never be in a place to accomplish that, at least maybe while I'm still like working full time. And
that's a lot of, like how much time does making one of those gnomes take?
So it can kind of depend. I mean, it definitely gets faster as you get used to it. And like you can make them fancier, or like this one has like a little heart on his sweater, which is like, a not necessary detail. I have one that has like a polka dotted hat. The polka dots are really satisfying. I think your dinosaur has polka dots.
Yes, right? I totally enjoyed putting the polka dots on this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this guy has a polka dotted hat. But she also, like, she had days where she would make a baby gnome, which was like basically like a little ball, which I was like, I support that.
How you did that day.
Yeah, some days you got to simplify. Be where you are in that day, and if that day it's a baby gnome, you're not cheating. I buy it. So it I mean, to me though, it's still a big commitment to do something like that every day.
That's a huge commitment. I
Yeah.
did one when I was all Instagram. Everyone's on Instagram. I need to do be on Instagram. And so I decided that I was going to create a themed, because at the time, everyone was about themes. Like the ones that had themes seemed more intriguing and interesting to me. So I created this macro photo Instagram, and I did one photo a day
Oh
for a
yeah.
year. But I'm all like, that's just me going, bloop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't imagine devoting like a hour every day to like creating. But yeah, I guess that is practice is how you get better at it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I had a streak where like I would do it a lot at night, like watching TV, which I also like because like nowadays, like at the end of the day, I'm tired. And so like the minute I sit down, the minute I stop moving, I
Mm-hmm.
fall asleep. And then like, I don't know what happened in the show. So like I don't know what happened to Miss Maisel. I don't know. So now like I find if I like have a little activity I can do while watching that's simple enough that I can still, pay attention, but
And
something to keep me I guess, physically awake.
yeah, that's wise. I am can't do two things at once. I either have to watch or I have to do the thing. Although that's a lie, because I will scroll social media while watching TV, but I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe when I feel like when I'm doing something artful, I like have a hard time, but maybe with felting, because felting is rather just,
yeah.
pretty forgiving. I could try that.
And it depends on the shows too. Like if you're watching like, like especially one of those shows that's like a baking show or one of those like reality competition shows where they're making stuff,
Yeah,
it's pretty easy to look down for a minute while they're,
yeah,
sauteing their mushrooms or
because
whatever.
they draw those things out.
I will recommend if you do felting while watching TV, like I equipment wise bought these little like leather like finger covers. So that way while you're holding it, like it saves that painful like stab your finger moment.
Ah, all right. Well,
Pro tip.
I will get. I'm gonna get a list of these things that you've been mentioning, and then when I piece together the recording, I'll put it in the notes so people
Oh
can
yeah.
find all these different cool things you've been mentioning and talking about. Um, the other thing that I think I've seen you do are little crochet things. Is this true? Or am I
I do
missing
not
that?
crochet at all.
Oh,
But yeah, so I've mostly just done I don't think I crochet. No, I don't crochet. But yeah, I do a lot of the other thing I do is like I make props by necessity. So one thing that like, comes up like I'll be like, "Oh, I need like for example on the last show I directed for school we needed a big dragon head and you go like okay how do I go about getting a big dragon head so luckily we had just moved schools and so my classroom was filled with a lot of recyclables so I think here I have a picture right here actually I can show you so I just started looking around at what I had in the room in terms of like odd cardboard pieces and like foam things that like, when you pack something, you have it shipped and there's foam to protect it. Like our new lighting equipment for the theater had a lot of that.
mm.
So here we go. Okay. So it's not totally complete here. Maybe you can see if let's see, let me get it in the right spot. There you
Yep,
go.
I see it.
So there's a dragon head and that was made from like a
Bring
big
it forward.
cardboard box.
Bring it forward just a
There
little.
we go. I'll put it
Right there.
all right, perfect. So yeah, and there's some like styrofoam pieces that I used for the eyes. And there were some like kind of like almost like egg carton parts that I put on top to give it texture, and then I spray painted the whole thing. So it's just this combination of recycled materials that I used to make that. And so it's pretty frequent that you find a prop that maybe it's only in one scene, and so you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on it. So
Mhm.
you look at what you have. I also have here some like there had to be talking rock puppets.
Oh
So
yes, I
it's
remember those. Those
yeah, those
are
are cardboard
amazing.
boxes that are just have eyeballs on them and are covered in foam insulation, which was painted. Um, so it's it's kind of fun to figure out like, okay, what's a way I can make this, I've done like an antique camera out of cardboard boxes. I've done an old-fashioned radio out of a cardboard box, where you find an old toothpaste cap and spray paint it gold or black and glue it on to make a knob for the, like how you would turn it on. So that's always an interesting thing to, have some sort of object that you have to create, but you don't have a large budget to do it, or don't want to use a large budget to do it because it's only in one scene or it's mentioned really quickly.
Yeah.
So that especially, I did a lot of years of like teaching like summer drama camps and things like that, where you work for 2 weeks and put on a play, and you literally just have whatever recyclables that the parents drop off from home to make things out of. So over the years and working with other teachers, you share tips and tricks and learn little things. I've started using zip ties a lot to hold things together, because like it's a little bit sturdier than hot glue.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah. I just thinking, yeah, cardboard is the ultimate crafting zone material because it's abundant, aplenty, especially nowadays. But well, as we're slowly moving out of the pandemic, but while we were in the pandemic, maybe you were getting everything at home, right? Having access to cardboard is great. And I love the idea of using the zip ties. I've also found there are places that sell these kind of grommet things that are like connectors for cardboard connectors that you can get.
yeah.
And so you can, that's a great way to be able to fasten pieces together and also, I think, create movement. I think they allow you to make some movement. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I haven't used this, but I have heard
some
about them. Yeah.
buried in the lid center somewhere. So when I uncover them, I will give you some to experiment with because I think that's also a neat way to connect the cardboard. I'm always amazed at how fast this time goes.
Is that it already?
It's been like 30 minutes. And I know, I feel like we're just getting started.
I know.
So you've actually answered my last question, but I guess I'm gonna come up with another one. So my last question for you is well, you kind of answered that as well. So I guess I want to leave everyone with something inspiring and uplifting. And you talked a little bit about it, but maybe you might have a different, an additional answer to it. What does getting into the crafting zone in your life, how does that help you just manage day-to-day stress and activity and like, what are the benefits of getting in the crafting zone? That's the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I do think there is something, and this kind of ties into what I said before, like just about that sense of like completing a step. Like even if you don't finish something, especially these ones where you're following instructions, you can be like, okay, I'm just going to go until I get to it's kind of like being like, I'm just going to read to the end of the next chapter. You feel like you have done, kind of almost like a tangible amount of progress on something. And I think as someone who works in an art form where it's hard to like really tell when something is done, I do like that. I do feel like sometimes it's hard to carve out the time to just sit and do a craft, particularly if it's not something that's like for a production or like, I know I need to have a dragon head by this date. So a lot of, I was looking, through some old photos and things. And like, I was like, when we were kind of at the height of the pandemic, that was a really great time to just sit and do something and kind of develop, some skills that I'd kind of started on a little bit, but just hadn't had as much time to sit with. So I became really proficient in them. I feel like I often start a lot of crafts or start to learn a new thing, but like taking that time to sit where I go like, okay, I really know how to do this now. I still feel like I kind of know how to do some things.
Yeah.
Like, I'd love to know how to crochet. I know a lot of people who are so into knitting, and I'm like, that's really cool how you made that.
Yeah.
But like the tangling of the string is, I made a crocheted hat one time when I was on tour. Like we were just traveling around in a van, and what else you're gonna do when you're sitting in a van? This is before smartphones, so I was like, what
Yeah.
else do you do? But it was like really hard and kind of like a frisbee. Like I don't know, I don't know if I did it too tightly or what. So that's something I'd love to learn someday. But I also feel like I try and tell myself, no, 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 like spend more time on the ones you already have started and get better at those, before you
Yeah. And I
choose
think as
something
you
new.
were saying that, I was thinking about that woman in the Gnome project and thinking, how can we, as very busy people, take one aspect of this idea of practicing something every day, but maybe we do little sprints of it. So maybe we're not practicing it every day. Maybe we're practicing it once a week for an entire year, right? Or something that feels a little bit more manageable. But I like
Yeah.
this idea of practice because I think a lot of innovation and a lot of the ideas just comes from practicing and trial and error.
There's a TED talk that I really like. It's about a man. I feel bad I don't know his name right now, but it's about a man who was learning how to play ukulele. And I think the amount of time he was like, it takes 40 hours just to become like able to do a skill. It's not about becoming like a master. But he talks about just like that's when you can really kind of see the progress in terms of what
Mm.
it's a great talk, like because sometimes you do think like this idea of becoming like a master at something, like it's just overwhelming, like I'm never going to be able to spend that much amount of time on something. But if you just set a certain amount of time and go, I'm going to do it for this much and then see where I'm at, I think that's an interesting and achievable goal to do. During the pandemic last year, one of my drama classes that met 5 days a week, on Fridays we just practiced juggling, and I showed them that videotape of the man with the ukulele, just as kind of like, let's just see where we get if we do this every Friday, because juggling is another one of those things, like everybody thinks I know how to juggle and I don't, because I went to clown school. They're like, can't you juggle? I'm like, no, I can't juggle. It takes so much practice and it's not my natural, like, I don't know, my hand-eye
Takes a
coordination.
special coordination. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just not my thing, but I did get better. And there were a couple kids in my class who were like pretty good by the end of it. So, it was just nice to like, okay, let's carve out this time to work on this one specific thing.
Well, let's end there on that note. I love it. Carve out some time to do one specific thing. And the first step is always the hardest, but hopefully today everyone gains some tips of ways they can get started. And as I said, I will collect all these resources from Katie and I will post them in the show notes when I post the recording on, to YouTube for everyone to see. And I love it. Puppet theater with the gnomes. Thank you so much, Katie O'Bryon Champlin. It's awesome. Thank you. And we'll dance you out with
There we go.
And for that, I'm gonna stop. All right, bye everyone.